You don't hear the blast first. You hear the confusion. A radar sweep that looks wrong. A drone-sized dot that refuses to behave like a plane. A signal that feels jammed, delayed, bent. And then the sky starts filling with cheap shapes, small, slow, and relentless, coming from directions that don't make sense. That's the first lesson of Iran's modern arsenal. The danger isn't always a single dramatic superweapon. It's the way Iran stacks pressure. Drones, missiles, mines, fast boats, air defenses, into a layered threat that forces opponents to spend more, move slower, and make mistakes. Iran's weapons today are built around one core mission: deterrence through cost and uncertainty. Iran cannot match the US, or some regional rivals plane for plane, ship for ship, so it leans into tools that change the math. Large numbers of drones, a deep ballistic missile program, mobile launchers, hardened or underground infrastructure, and maritime tactics designed to turn geography, especially choke points like the Strait of Hormuz, into an advantage. Reuters has described Iran as having the Middle East's largest ballistic missile stockpile and a self-imposed range limit around 2,000 kilometers, enough to threaten key regional targets. This video is a declassified dossier on Iran's modern weapons in 5 layers, the way planners actually think about it. The swarm, drones that saturate defenses. The reach, ballistic and cruise missiles. The wall, air defense networks. The trap, naval swarms, mines and coastal missiles. And the shadow, survivability, mobility, underground basing, deception. We'll name the famous systems you've heard of, like the Shahed-136 one-way attack drone and key missile families such as Sigil and Khaybar-Shekan. But we'll focus on the real question. Why does Iran's arsenal keep reshaping regional security calculations even when its conventional air force is widely viewed as aging? Reuters has noted Iran's air force challenges while highlighting its missile and indigenous air defenses. Because the scariest moment in modern war is not always the explosion. It's the moment you realize the battlefield is being rewritten around you by systems designed to overwhelm, distract, and strike from multiple angles. In part 2, we begin with the most visible symbol of Iran's modern warfare brand, the drone swarm. If Iran has a signature weapon of the modern era, it's not a tank or a jet, it's the drone. Specifically, the kind that's cheap enough to launch in large numbers, simple enough to be produced at scale, and dangerous enough to force expensive air defenses to reveal themselves. The Shahed-136 became globally notorious as a one-way attack drone used in mass strikes, designed to overwhelm defenses through volume and persistence. Open-source references describe it as a one-way attack drone associated with Iranian design and widespread use, and reporting has highlighted how it can be launched in multiples to saturate targets. Recent reporting also underscores how Iran's Shahed drones have been deployed in regional contexts and why their low-cost terror factor matters: the engine noise, the slow approach, the uncertainty of where they'll dive. Here's why this matters strategically. Drones don't just hit targets, they shape the defense. When air defenses fire interceptors at small drones, they burn through costly missiles, reveal radar positions, and create patterns the attacker can study. Even when drones are shot down, they can still win by exhausting defenders or forcing them to protect too many points at once. And Iran doesn't treat drones as a standalone trick. It treats them as the opening act, softening, distracting, and pulling attention before higher speed threats arrive. Iran's drone ecosystem is broader than one model: reconnaissance drones for surveillance, strike drones for attacks, and one-way drones for saturation. The point is the same: persistent pressure. Drones turn time into a weapon. They make defenders stay alert for hours, not minutes. They encourage dispersal. They complicate decision-making. They can be launched from multiple locations and used as decoys to draw fire. In modern conflicts, the attacker often wants to create a moment where the defender's screen is crowded and their choices are bad. Protect the airbase or the refinery, the radar or the command post. That's the frightening elegance of Iran's drone layer. It scales. It's not about a perfect shot. It's about enough shots, enough noise, enough uncertainty until something gets through, or until the defender runs out of patience, missiles, or luck. But drones are only one half of Iran's modern identity. Part 3 is the heavier punch: ballistic and cruise missiles, systems Reuters and other trackers describe as central to Iran's deterrent. Iran's missile program is the backbone of its modern deterrence, a way to threaten targets at distance without relying on a modern air force to break through. Reuters has emphasized Iran's large ballistic missile stockpile and noted Iran's self-imposed range cap around 2,000 km, still enough to reach many key targets in the region. Open-source tracking tables list major systems and ranges, including solid fuel missiles such as Sejil, often sighted around 2,000 km, and Khaybar-Shikan, commonly sighted around 1,450 km. What makes these missiles powerful isn't just range. It's survivability and variety. Iran fields multiple families: short-range ballistic missiles for regional strikes, medium-range ballistic missiles for deterrence depth, and cruise missiles that can fly lower and follow different routes. Reuters has also reported on Iran's missile infrastructure, mobile launchers, underground facilities, and efforts to improve survivability and operational resilience. The message is blunt. Even if one site is threatened, the launch capability may persist elsewhere. Iran's missile layer works especially well when paired with its drone layer. Drones can stress defenses, pull attention, and fill the sky with slow targets. Missiles then arrive faster, on different trajectories, compressing the defender's reaction window. This is the logic of layered strike. Don't bet everything on one perfect weapon. Force the defender to fight a multi-speed, multi-axis problem. And Iran demonstrates these capabilities in drills and public messaging. For example, AP reported Iranian drills involving missile launches and footage of strikes during exercises near strategically vital waterways. The details can be debated across sources, but the strategic intent is consistent: signal reach, signal readiness, signal that retaliation can be complex and hard to preempt. The fear factor here is not invincibility. Missile defenses exist, and accuracy varies by system and scenario. The fear factor is the dilemma. Defenders must harden bases, disperse aircraft, protect fuel, shield command nodes, and build layered air defenses everywhere, all the time. Which brings us to part 4, Iran's attempt to build the wall, an air defense network meant to complicate strikes into Iranian airspace. Iran's air defense story is complicated. Many analysts argue Iran's fighter fleet is aging, but Iran has invested heavily in ground-based air defenses, both imported systems and indigenous ones, to make air operations against it riskier and more expensive. Reuters has pointed to Iran's indigenous air defenses while discussing the wider air power balance. Meanwhile, open-source analysis and reporting describe a multi-layered network that includes systems such as Bavar 373, often discussed as an indigenous long-range system, and other medium-range mobile defenses like Corded 15. Here's the key concept. Air defense isn't one launcher, it's a network. Early warning radars detect, command centers classify, and different missile layers engage at different ranges. Mobility matters because fixed sites can be targeted. Redundancy matters because radars can be jammed or destroyed. And integration matters because the defender wants multiple chances to intercept. Long-range shots to push attackers back, mid-range systems to punish those who press in, and point defenses to protect critical nodes. Some recent open-source commentary has compared elements of Iran's air defense layers, for example, differentiating mass and depth versus mobility and responsiveness among systems. The precise performance claims vary and can be exaggerated in propaganda, so the smarter way to understand Iran's air defense is not, can it stop everything? But can it raise the cost and uncertainty enough to deter or delay? In modern war, forcing an attacker to spend more time on suppression, fly longer routes, and commit more assets can be valuable even if the defense is not impenetrable. Air defense also connects back to Iran's broader strategy, protecting the missile force and command nodes long enough to ensure retaliation is possible. If Iran can keep enough sensors and launchers alive, it can preserve the threat of follow-on strikes, even under pressure. That's why Iran's wall is not just offensive, it is part of deterrence signaling. Part 5 is where Iran becomes uniquely dangerous in geography. The sea lane trap, fast boats, mines, coastal missiles, and drones that turn narrow waters into a chessboard of risk. Iran's naval power is not defined by massive blue water fleets. It's defined by choke points, proximity, and asymmetric pressure. In narrow waters like the Persian Gulf, and especially around the Strait of Hormuz, Iran can leverage geography to compress reaction time. Public reporting and defense analysis frequently describe an approach built around fast attack craft, swarms, coastal missile batteries, drones, and sea mines. Tools intended to complicate the operations of larger navies rather than duel them ship to ship. This is the trap layer. The goal is not to win a classic naval battle. The goal is to create a high-risk environment where commercial shipping, escorts, and carrier groups must operate cautiously, slower, more defensive, more burdened by constant surveillance and threat checks. Fast boats can blend into coastal clutter. Mines create the nightmare of uncertainty. You can't see them easily, but you must assume they exist. Coastal anti-ship missiles add another axis. If ships approach within certain ranges, they enter engagement zones that force defensive postures. Iran also pairs naval pressure with drones and missiles in messaging and exercises, reinforcing the idea that conflict at sea could be multi-domain. Drones overhead, missiles from the coast, fast craft in the clutter, mines in the lanes. The psychological component is immense. When the price of a mistake is a damaged tanker, a blocked corridor, or a forced evacuation of maritime routes, deterrence can work even without constant combat. So what are Iran's most famous modern weapons today? The ones that repeatedly appear in global security conversations: Shahed-style one-way attack drones, ballistic missiles like Sejil and Sheikhan, a broad family of short and medium-range missiles supporting regional deterrence, layered air defense systems such as Bavar 373 and Cordad 15 in open-source discussion, and a maritime approach built on swarm tactics and chokepoint leverage. And here's the closing truth. Iran's modern arsenal is less about one best weapon and more about forcing impossible choices. Defend the base or the port, protect the radar or the runway, chase the drones or brace for missiles, clear mines or keep escorts moving. Iran's power lives in layering. Cheap threats that distract, heavy threats that punish, and geography that amplifies every mistake.